Okay, super difficult to do for the show, and that's why I find it so interesting. There's so much to talk about here. I'd love to see any alternate takes in the comments. So starting with the main characters, let's go ahead and begin with what I think would be a pretty controversial pick. Mel. So Mel is a very great character in general. It's also very hard because she makes such a 180 at the end, sort of. I think she makes it clear that most of what she does throughout the entire story is for self-absorbed reasons. She does not seem concerned with the risks of Hextech or with magic in general. She just wants to be rich. She wants to solve her inferiority complex, her family neuroses. She basically runs a totally corrupt council, and she's fine with it. She's fine with the corruption. She encourages more throughout the show. She's one of the people who pushes Jayce to develop Hextech in the first place, despite the risks, and then later on to develop Hextech personal tools, and then later on to develop Hextech weapons. And then, she does redeem herself somewhat. She leads the council in a vote for peace. A vote for peace that's too late, that won't matter. This is a redemption. It's admirable. She definitely overcame some personal demons, but this is not Darth Vader killing the Emperor here. This would be like Darth Vader trying to lift the Emperor, getting winded, putting him back down, and letting him kill Luke and destroy the rebellion. On the whole, Mel had selfish motives and failed to accomplish much good for anyone aside from making herself and a few other elites super rich. And we don't know how much of Zahn's problems in the first place are on her as a council member, but she certainly never demonstrated any care in helping them. We do see her demonstrating some care and protective instincts in her flashback, and I do think that there's some lawful good part of her, maybe something we'll see in season 2 that ended up driving her to make the 180 we see at the end. But again, didn't matter this season, essentially a non-decision compared to her actions for the whole show. Mel, lawful evil. She needs structure to work her manipulation, and that's the lawful part. Evil, I think, is going to be the controversial part of this. Lawful neutral, I think, is also reasonable, but I think the limit of neutral, which I'm defining as motivated by personal internal goals instead of a moral, kind of big picture, is when those internal goals are as blatantly superficial as Mel. She wants money, she wants power, she wants her family to approve of her, and when things are at their most corrupt and potentially harmful, she's fine with that. Prevalence of personal aims over morals is neutral for me. No morality at all, and just personal aims is evil. Okay, next, Vi. Vi is hard to place. At no point does she want or do anything bad, so I don't think she can be placed in that row. She is a criminal, not that that has much to do with the lawful question. She is someone who ends up working with law enforcement. She takes down criminals to bring order to Zahn, seemingly, but working with doesn't equal lawful. If we think about what she wants, what she values, I think her alignment becomes pretty clear. All she cares about is powder. That's it. She will break the law. She will fight anyone from Zahn to Piltover. Doesn't matter, anyone who gets between her and powder. She'll work with Caitlyn to find powder. She'll work with Jayce to go after Silco because he's the monster who corrupted powder. Vi has principles. She's undoubtedly principled about how she operates. She has the morality of means, but I don't think she has the morality of ends. I don't think she has universal values. Her only value in life is her sister. Anything else for her comes back to that, not to some grand moral vision. Vi, true neutral. She has personal motives that don't have to do with the greater picture of good or evil. She doesn't favor the side of order or freedom per se, whatever is going to help her achieve her personal goals. Caitlyn the police officer. Lawful. No, I'm kidding. So her role as a police officer is actually where she is least lawful. I think Caitlyn is the most good character we see in the series. She doesn't seem to care about herself much at all. She is very, very selfless. She just wants to take down the menace who's causing all the trouble within and between Piltover and Zahn. She works tirelessly towards that goal. She is someone who sees the good in people and works to bring that out of them. She won't even kill Jinx because someone she trusts sees the good in her. Caitlyn is so good that she doesn't care who she's working with. She doesn't have strong feelings about order per se, chain of command, things like that. But she's obviously not a wild card either. She just wants to help people. That's it, and you better get out of her way. Caitlyn, neutral good. Selfless, kindness, and justice over everything else. Okay, Silco. Silco, I think, is one of the more important and interesting ones to establish. I think his cause is just. The Undercity is being oppressed. They cannot breathe the air where they live. It makes them sick, makes them die. And Piltover does nothing. If Piltover cannot govern the Undercity, it should govern itself, and that's Silco's whole big thing. But what ends up happening? He betrays the guy who is undeniably keeping things peaceful. Even if it's not the best situation, Vander is doing some good. He is preventing a lot of violence and harm from topside. If you're going to kill this guy and upset the status quo, it better be for a good reason. You better be prepared to act. And Silco doesn't. He maintains the same status quo as Vander, just using someone much less stable than Grayson because he killed her too. And then he just doesn't go to war. He just sits back on his drunk empire and makes life in Zahn even worse, undeniably. Maybe Silco could have been a hero, but he never acted on his own goals. Instead, with the Shimmer Empire, he just acted against the best interests of his own people. That seals him as a villain in my book, as evil. And as for the type of evil, kind of a paradoxical character. He values betrayal in his own life, but loyalty in his followers, which I guess is kind of how tyrants actually are. He likes things to go according to plan, which is why he's so conflicted over Jinx. So Silco, lawful evil. Evil because his motives and actions are essentially just destructive and cause suffering. Lawful because basically he's a tyrant. He values order and hierarchy and maintaining his rule, and his rule is brutal. Okay, Vander. To contrast with what came before Silco, we have Vander, and I had a hard time with him too because his policy is literally keep the status quo. And despite what I said before with Silco about Silco's goals and how, they are reasonable, I do think Vander's are reasonable too. His whole thing is everybody loses and more. He's experienced that, and that's true. He knows what loses. The problem is that he doesn't really know what wins. His status quo thing solves some problems. It doesn't solve a lot of problems also. Zaun is still suffering. And Vander just doesn't really have an end game. He just kind of is not doing anything, and that's what made me lean towards true neutral. But two things made me change my mind about Vander. One, it's hard to ignore how lawful he is. One of the first things we see him do is use his power to ensure honesty in a random business deal. He is about maintaining a kind of order, a balance with Piltover via Grayson, and this is even when it involves sacrifice. It's the threat of disorder that moves him to make that sacrifice. And that's where the second point comes in. Vander's all about protecting the weak, and maybe he doesn't have a master plan like an independent Zaun idea, but maintaining the status quo is how he protects Zaun from more, which he sees as the ultimate cause of suffering, the highest priority to prevent. He gives up violence as a whole for that, and he's prepared to sacrifice himself to do that. Vander, lawful good. Lawful because he values order, not strict Piltover law, but order. Good because he's a protector, even to his own detriment. Okay, Jayce, a character who's probably going to place himself in a different box than where I would place him. Jayce caused a lot of harm throughout the series. He is responsible for the good of Hextech and for the bad. He's at the root of Jinx and Vi's traumatic past. He paves the way for the destruction of Piltover, maybe at the hands of Jinx, but he does have good intentions, and you cannot really avoid that, and he does do some good with those intentions. When he was outraged and he did resort to violence, it was a just outrage. He had seen all these people killed, people who in his mind were totally not deserving of that fate. He realized that it will only escalate, so he resorted to specific violence towards a productive end, and it was a productive end, -1 child death. He did take out Silco's Shimmer Factory, he got Silco to come to the table for peace talks, and he accomplished making peace with Silco. Hard to say any of that is bad. Now, Jayce's problem is that he is so unbelievably bad at evaluating how to achieve his moral aims, and because of that, it's tempting to call him chaotic neutral just because he is so all over the place. From being a corrupt politician who is doing all these under the table deals to deposing one of the major stabilizing forces in Piltover, imposing rules that bankrupt his own city, imposing blockades that end up with murdered law enforcement, and this is all aiming to prevent something that ends up happening anyway, and we get a dead child along the way. Such a mess of a character. But at the end of the day, Jayce, chaotic good. His impulse to do good for the world makes him take so many dumb risks. He is uncontrollable. He wants desperately to be neutral good. I think if he acknowledged how chaotic he is, then he would stop. But yeah, chaotic good. Okay, Viktor. Viktor also very interesting. On the surface, same as Jayce, but let's be careful here. So to start out, pretty plain that Viktor is the least risk-averse character in the whole series. He pushes Jayce to risk it all developing Hextech. He risks it all. He has a lot to lose. And then he risks it all himself in his work with Hexcore on his own body. We see him surprisingly cool under pressure when disarming Jinx is explosive. And I think it's that coolness that fools us when it comes to Viktor. Underneath all that cool and calm, underneath his diligence and his work ethic is pure desperation. His inner world is hopeless. He's been lonely his whole life. He's basically given up on connecting with people, so much so that he can't even notice Sky's affection towards him. This is someone on the brink of giving up on himself, especially towards the end. And the only thing standing in the way of that, I think, is this chance through science to make a mark on the world. I think that's the place of science for him, that and saving his own life. And when it comes down to it, these are personal aims, these are personal goals. And in the end, we see his desperation for survival trumping his altruism. Even when he sees the havoc it can wreak, he cannot destroy the Hexcore. That's how I see Viktor. He's another character who I think would see himself as neutral good or maybe chaotic good, but I think otherwise, Viktor, chaotic neutral. He has the facade of altruism, but scratch the surface and it's an interpersonal aim. He struggles with this, he feels bad when he sees the consequences, but he cannot force himself to do what he sees as good in the end. He even sums up his place in the story as failing to do good, and I think he knows that that's a reflection on him. Sevika, very interesting case. I have a lot to say about this character that I don't think I can cover here. I think she's the anti-Vi. I think she has an anti-arc to go along with it. Very, very, cool setup for a character. So the issue with Sevika is that she works for the big bad who I labeled as lawful evil. But Silco's goal wasn't the evil part, and that's why Sevika signed on. She believes in the cause of independent Zaun. She pledges herself to Silco only because of that, and we don't see her waver on that at all, no matter what the stakes. She protects him at the cost of her own arm. She refuses to betray him even when there's reason to, and when there's support for doing so. And from her perspective, and it's not that unreasonable either, she is acting to protect Zaun, so there's an argument for lawful good here, strange as it sounds. But the scene with the Chembarons ultimately proves that she values loyalty more than good, because she knows that Silco never followed through on his plans. She's been there the whole time. She knows that he just set up a money-making empire, made a new under-the-table deal with the Enforcers to maintain the status quo, and I think deep down she also knows that he values Jinx over everything. So why is she still there? Because she's loyal. That's it. That's Sevika. Symbolically, I think this is really interesting. We see her in Silco's office in the final scene. Unable to get what she originally wanted, she remains completely loyal. It's kind of like a Hachiko vibe. She just goes right back to this empty office. You know, she never got what she wanted. It didn't lead to an independent zone, but that's just who she is. Sevika, lawful neutral. Lawful in that she values loyalty as a form of order, and you can see this by how much she despises Jinx, because chaos just gets in the way of her cause, it doesn't help. And neutral because her value of loyalty trumps her value over everything else. I don't think she sees herself that way, but her actions prove otherwise. Marcus. Okay, so I think he thinks he's doing what Grayson did, and we'll talk about her in a bit, but Grayson never would have dealt with a Silco, I don't think. She trusted Vander, and Vander is someone who's worth trusting. We're setting up the kind of arrangement that they had because Vander is a stand-up dude. But Marcus really shows he's not committed to much. Marcus goes behind Grayson's back because he's angry, basically. He wants blood, he wants war. Once he is allied with Silco and realizes that is bad, he can't make the moral self-sacrificing decision, which is a high bar, totally get that, but it does show his moral limits. What motivates him? Not balance or harmony or anything global at all, really, nothing really moral, it's just his love for his daughter. That's fine, but he's a mess. He doesn't know what he's doing, he's all over the place, he does stuff for no reason. Marcus, neutral evil. I think he wants to be someone who's lawful good. I think he's in a lot of conflict, but at the end of the day, he's just kind of a ball of emotion and weakness. Total mess, and I assume he fails at whatever he's trying to do. I don't really know. We can only hope his daughter's okay. Heimerdinger, maybe controversial again. Here's where I was at first, true neutral, because his character has no effect on basically anything that happens in the show. He warns Jayce, Jayce doesn't listen to him. He expels Jayce to prevent him from developing Hextech. Jayce does it anyway. He wants Jayce to develop Hextech more slowly, safely. Jayce listens to him for like a day and then kicks him off the council and says explicitly, you don't have a plan. And at that moment, he then actually just does nothing. He takes a walk, he meets Ekko, and that's it for the character for the whole season. Character who can't accomplish anything he wants, that doesn't give you a whole lot to work with. But I think you ultimately have to say that he's not neutral on the lawful chaotic scale. He wants everything in its place and time. He set up this whole city as this ordered society in the mess of Runeterra. Whenever there's a crisis, there's an ordered, logical, scientific way to handle it, and then we can move on to more important things. I think also symbolically he represents order, and so much about him, even his size as a Yordle, represents how diminished order is in influencing Piltover for the good. Similar to Sevika, once a character elevates lawfulness to an end and can't really see whether he's actually doing good or bad beyond that, that's more lawful than good. That's Heimerdinger to a T. Everything in its time and place. If it's operating according to plan, then things must be okay. In the show, he eventually realizes that it's not okay, and then, he is probably going to start to evolve into some kind of lawful good, but for now, Heimerdinger, lawful neutral. Concerned about order and things working how they're supposed to, conflates that with good, loses sight of good entirely. Okay, and last but not least for our major characters, Jinx. Jinx is hard. Well, she's partly hard. Obviously, easiest chaotic pick of the whole cast. Every definition of chaotic. No principles. She doesn't know what she's going to do until like the moment of, or even after that in many cases. No stable allegiances to a single member of the cast. She doesn't even have that many scenes, so it's crazy how much of this they're able to fit in. But like, we see her allied with Sevika, then she turns on Sevika. She's allied with Silco, she's stabbing Silco, she kills Silco, and then she's crying for him. She's hugging Vi, and then she's suspicious. She's someone who just can't make up her mind. And if we go back to the Powder era, it's even more of a mess. She's Ekko's pal, then she tries to blow both of them up. She kills her whole family. The question is good, neutral, or evil. I did make a whole video about this, sort of. I think hero-villain is a much different question than good-evil. So here we're talking about her inner morals, and she has none, at least that's my opinion. There's one line when she's Powder that seems to imply that she wants Zaun independence or even recognizes the oppression of Zaun. But we know Powder has a complex about being weak. She wishes she were a fighter. She's desperate to be strong like Vi. This could easily just be about her fantasizing about being strong and powerful. And besides that, even when Jinx is with Silco, she doesn't mention the cause at all, not even once, make reference to it, anything. Jinx's one constant throughout the whole show is that she just wants to be loved and cared for by Silco, by Vi, whoever. Personal aims like that, even when they cause good or evil, I think fall under neutral. But there is a limit, just like with Mel. Jinx doesn't aim to cause suffering, I don't think, but she definitely doesn't care about it either. She murders that Firelight because she's freaked out. She kills a bunch of enforcers and laughs it off. She tries to murder her childhood friend. She shoots a random bird for actual no reason. And then the final scene, she fires her missile, probably starts a war, kills a lot of people for sure. We don't know exactly which ones. And the only reason we get is...
I'll show them.
Jinx is chiefly concerned with feeling loved and cared for, but her apathy towards murder and destruction, and in the end her vengeful need for it, that tips the scales for her. Jinx, lawful good. No, I'm kidding. Jinx, chaotic evil. Chaotic because duh, and evil because of the body count and her lack of concern and her destruction for destruction's sake at the end. And I think that makes the argument that she's a hero even more interesting, by the way, because when have you ever seen a chaotic evil hero? I certainly haven't. Okay, and bonus, the actual last but not least for the major characters, Powder. Different character from Jinx, she even has her own chair. We can rule out lawful for sure, but the question is whether she's motivated by moral or personal aims at this age. We talked about that one line where she talks about fighting Piltover. She has a few other lines like that hint that she might have some moral compass at this point in her life. She hates feeling inferior, she hates that her inventions don't work, and the thing that she absolutely hates more than anything else is being left alone. Even that line about Zon independence could also just be interpreted as her joining in on the group sentiment that we see everyone else there expressing. And given what she becomes, even if she does have this moral element, where did it go? Even the scenes where she is wavering between Powder and Jinx, then we don't see any hint of that. So that's where we are as far as the good label. As far as the evil label, I don't think she's evil, because everything bad that she does end up doing is completely contrary to what she wants. Internally, I don't think she's showing any traits or ethics or flaws that I would label as evil, but of course things do go very wrong every time with her, completely out of her control. So Powder, chaotic neutral, driven by personal need to feel loved, a total mess operationally. I hear the argument for true neutral, since she doesn't value chaos and thrive on it like Jinx does. She hates that she's chaotic, but there you go, she is chaotic. She operates according to that principle, whether she wants to or not. Okay, minor characters. Not as much to go on here, but I think some of them are pretty clear anyway. Grayson. Grayson sees eye to eye with Vander on a practical level, how to best care for both cities. She doesn't show signs of being concerned with altruism per se, just her role of keeping things working in a balanced way. The only other scene we get from her is her letting little kid Caitlyn win the shooting competition, but I think it's also for what I would consider a very lawful reason. It's better if she wins. She deserves it. What differentiates her from Vander, I think, is that we don't see signs of like the protector archetype in her like we do with Vander. Grayson, lawful neutral. All about order, we don't really see anything else. Okay, Ambessa. So I think this is also what makes my Mel pick questionable, because this character just totally skews our perspective on Mel. This is definitely just like a genuine might makes right tyrant we have here. Her ends and means are both fairly evil. She tries to manipulate everyone she interacts with in Piltover into developing hex-tech weapons to use in their war that she doesn't even really care about, only so that she can potentially get hands on it for her own political goals, her own wars. She disowns her own daughter for not being like strong enough with a capital S, not demonstrating a might makes right kind of murder instinct as we see like with the princess scene. And then she comes back like nothing happened and kind of waves the daughter carrot in front of Mel, which is fairly cruel. I'm no expert on league lore, but I get the impression that Noxus as a whole is like this might makes right empire. Strong should rule the weak should be ruled over. Ambessa Medarda, lawful evil. Because she's a tyrant, and yeah, that makes her so different from Mel, and that's what's weird about the fact that I have both of them in the same category. The lawful, I think everyone would agree on for both of them, but it is different levels of evil. Tyranny versus greed, power fantasy versus apathy, but both evil in my book. Ekko. So Ekko's about something objectively good for the community he takes care of. He has no ill will towards people like Heimerdinger, despite the fact that Heimerdinger is from Piltover, and he's only suspicious of Vi when it seems like she's working against his interests. But then he totally trusts her and Caitlyn too, just on Vi's word, which is pretty surprising. He is a protector, I think. I don't think he cares much about order or freedom as fundamental underlying forces like of some kind of moral vision. I think he's just trying to do good by helping people. Ekko, neutral good. Singed. Okay, so this is surprisingly one of the harder calls in the series, I think. This guy invents Shimmer and just uses it on animals, on people. He lets Silco do whatever he wants with it. He just wants to advance science at any cost, sacrificing any standing he'd have in society. He doesn't care at all. He has no problems doing experiments on like living, suffering things, and including people, Vander in all likelihood. We see no hint of any morals or principles whatsoever, anything good or bad to be committed to or to be inconsistent with, just science, in a way that even Viktor seems to almost sympathize with. I think there's a good argument here for chaotic neutral. He is just an uncontrolled force working outside morality. But that said, his lack of concern for any harm his science causes whatsoever seems short-sighted or disingenuous or delusional or just plain evil. So, singed, chaotic evil. Okay, and just for fun, here are some characters who really have like very, very little to go on. I'm curious whether we'll see any of them become something more as the series goes on. And in general, I think a lot of the characters in the whole show are in the process of changing categories. Mel, Jayce, Heimerdinger, Viktor maybe Vi and Caitlyn. So anyway, that's my list. To be clear, throwing around labels like this shouldn't make us feel differently about anything really, any of the characters. It's not hate or blame or approval. I think Mel is a great character and the end of our arc is heroic on a character level. Silco, I deeply sympathize with Silco throwing everything away not to betray his daughter. Singed, I think is really cool while also thinking he's a monster, but also really cool. And then obviously Jinx, you know, we can call her whatever we want. We can call her a hero, we call her a villain, we call her morally good, morally evil, and I'll still tear up every time I watch the scene. This isn't about the best or worst characters or good or bad storytelling or how we relate to them. It's just to help us learn more about these terms and more about the story. And that's why I think this is so interesting to do with the story. I think this is a severely limited model, but that's what makes it so interesting, and it's why I wanted to do this particularly for this show with all of its gray, murky, complex characters. And you know, it's similar to my Jinx video, that it's not an interesting question if it's a story that has clear heroes and villains. When you have characters that defy the categories, that forces you to learn more about the categories. It forces you to think more about the characters, to appreciate them more. This is a theme I mentioned in a few videos now, but it's not about the answers. I don't care about the answers to these questions. Good questions are questions that make you think, make you reevaluate, questions that generate more discussion, more learning about the craft, more love of the stories. That's what I care about. And on that note, I would absolutely love to see any and all comments about my list, and I would love to see your own list. You can post them in the comments. You can use a format like this, which I'll leave in the description along with a character list, so just so you don't forget anyone. If you would like to subscribe, it would be an honor. It's honestly been such a treat to just see how many people have been enjoying the videos, and you know, the amount of support has just been incredible. It's been such a confidence boost for me. And similarly, the Patreon has been growing. Thank you so much for the support there. Leave a like if you want. You can also check this out, Minor Champion, my webcomic. It's a superhero parody series about solving really, really small problems in heroic ways. First issue is available for free on Webtoons, so I'll leave a link to that in the description. New videos Wednesday, Friday, and Sunday. Thanks for watching.